As you might be able to tell, I'm actually losing my voice. I hope it stays long enough for me to get through this part. You know, for us, Alien Isolation really is the Alien game that we've always wanted to play. A game that goes back to the roots of the series, back to that Ridley Scott Haunted House in Space. You know, we really wanted to make a game where just one alien could be a really meaningful and really terrifying interaction for the player. You know, for us, the alien very much is the star of the show. You know, it's very dynamic and reactive. It's very unpredictable and utterly, you know, very frightening. It's at the core of the game, and it's the core that we built the rest of the game around. Yet, for the alien to really, truly work, we had to create a very believable world. We wanted to make a game that really immersed the player, that really sucked them into the atmosphere. You know, we wanted to create an alien game like no other. So today, we're going to take you behind the scenes. We're going to show you some of the ways in which the incredibly talented team at Creative Assembly put this world together. And we're going to show you a little bit of an insight into how we went through creating the original content with the original crew and cast for the bonus content. So please welcome sound designer Byron Bullock and lead UI designer Jon McKellan.
Hello. So, so some people may have seen a little bit of this that we talked about at Res before, but just kind of want to recap about how we went about kind of creating the new spaces that you see in Sebastopol out of a film that was kind of set in a very small space. You know, the Nostromo in the original film was pretty small. We didn't see much of it. So this was a real challenge for us to extrapolate from what we saw and create whole new spaces. So what we really did was look at deconstructing the film to all its component parts. You know, we really tore apart every scene, every bit of set design to try and work out how this was built. And what we would do is we'd create archetypes, and an archetype would be a style guide of props, materials, fixtures, fittings, you know, everything that we could work out. How did they light those spaces? What materials did they use to build the sets, and how would they react to the light? Everything we could. This would be used to create a visual language which we could then move on from and create whole new assets and whole new spaces for the Sebastopol that looked and felt like they could have been just beyond a closed door on the Nostromo. You know, they'd feel authentic, but still be original, still be new for the player. Luckily, we were given a massive archive, 3 terabytes worth of stuff from Fox, of imagery and you know, behind-the-scenes stuff that was complete gold dust. That really helped us understand how things were done back then. The first thing we'd do would be to take the concepts that were done by the likes of Ron Cobb. This is some of his work they were really done in a very specific style, very architectural style, kind of line art rather than kind of big painted dioramas and such like. And we would produce our concept art in the same way. So we try and think the way they would think and use the same tools and the same methods. So this is an idea of a habitation archetype, the kind of living spaces, and how we would take what was in the film and stretch it out. So, and here you've got some of, on the left-hand side, some shots from the film, some concepts of larger spaces that we wouldn't see, and in the bottom right there's a kind of in-game screenshot of one of the habitation rooms that still looks kind of unmistakably alien, but is completely new. And just a small sampling of that habitation archetype shows you how we can extrapolate Nostromo in as close to detail as we could. Fox gave us blueprints, they gave us continuity Polaroids, they gave us shots that have never been seen that really allowed us to get a hang of how things were built and exactly what size and shape things were. So we've got these kind of shots, you know, stuff that you just didn't get to see in the film. Even seeing the set fully lit in a completely different way from what was in the film allowed us to get a handle on what was being used. Now, all of that gave us the structure and gave us the shape of things, but obviously lighting and VFX, you know, things like smoke and mist, as well as alarm lights and stuff, really was, you know, absolutely essential to get to what we actually saw in the film. It's one thing to be prop accurate and understand how the props are made, but to be screen accurate and make sure all these things come together in the same way was vitally important. So this is a little clip we're going to show you now of part of the Nostromo, and if you can cast your mind back to the film and how the kind of final sequences in that film looked, I think you'll see it's pretty similar. So that's a little bit of gameplay from the pre-order content. Obviously, in the film, Ellen Ripley didn't die from an alien event, but we get to play around with some what-ifs there. Along with the space, we had to recreate the Nostromo crew. You know, this is the first time the crew had kind of gotten back together for 35 years, and we had to kind of recreate their likenesses. Normally, we would look at things like still images and press images, anything that gives us a real high-resolution look at these people's faces from different angles. So we had to recreate the cast. Now, it's 35 years ago, it's not now, so you know, things like scanning is out of the question at this point. We're trying to recreate a likeness from a long time ago. We would use film stills and screenshots and try and get the best reference possible. But what we're really looking for is the kind of front-side elevations, you know, these kind of side-on shots that really give us an, you know, unfiltered look at what these guys look like. And luckily, the Fox archive had a few gems in there that made it really, you know, really easy for us to do. Continuity Polaroids existed. Now, continuity Polaroids, they kind of take at the end of each day to make sure that, you know, the costume is correct and hair is in the right place so that there's continuity between each day of filming. And they had taken all these shots of the main cast. So we had the perfect reference material that we couldn't have, we just did not expect to have this kind of stuff. So this was what we used to generate the final assets. We used these as reference, and also the kind of more press shots, you know, stuff that wasn't stills from the film but was on set. And that allowed us to create the likenesses of Ripley and co. Now, moving on from the Nostromo, this kind of building a bigger world, building the Sevastopol. Again, the Nostromo is this is roughly square footage what we kind of see in the film. And there's not much more to the Nostromo layout than this. But we had much more to create for the Sevastopol. And this is just some of it. There's a lot more to come from that. So we had a big challenge there because we couldn't, you know, even just looking at that, it's quite interesting that you can see that you can't just stick to the same shapes. You can't stick to the exact same layout of the Nostromo and do that for a full game campaign. We had to vary those spaces and create much larger rooms to explore, you know, and layered sections that you wouldn't normally see. So being a space station rather than a ship, there needed to be larger sections. You know, it couldn't all be corridors. It had to look beyond what we see in the Nostromo. Now, we do have those claustrophobic areas, those vents, and those areas that really feel, you know, unpleasant to be in. But the larger places would provide relief from that claustrophobia. It would add its own gameplay element, which would be that, you know, in a corridor you've got kind of danger from in front and behind, but in a wide open space you can breathe a bit more, but you're now open from any angle for attack. So it's a kind of trade-off in comfort there. Now, these larger spaces are still informed by the archetypes, are still, you know, inspired by the original architecture, but they are completely unique. A couple of concept examples. This is some observation sections with multi-layers, which you've not seen before. Some, you know, lobby areas that lead on to much more complex spaces. They have these kind of central hubs, and also things like transit stations and spaceports. You know, these large, really large areas that funnel a lot of people through that are completely new. Now, with these large spaces, we've got to try and bring them to life and inject some detail in there. The original film was incredibly detailed. You know, even now, if you look at the Blu-rays and really, you know, freeze frame that movie, the set design is incredible. It's like Roger Christian and those guys done an amazing job at making this thing feel real, and it's why it stands up today. So to make the Sevastopol believable in the same way, we had to keep that level of detail going through all of our spaces throughout the station. You know, it had to consistently be detailed. Now this detail adds backstory, adds atmosphere, and it can inform the gameplay. Things like player navigation and whether they get lost or not, we can use that detail to help the player understand where to go or inform them of dangers that are up ahead. And a couple of small clips of stuff here. We've got things like your personal lockers. I've got the multi-language signing that you see in the Nostromo. You know, even just little tiny sets of buttons that were in the film have been kind of meticulously recreated. And just a level of detail and a kind of monitor bank there where there's just so much stuff, you take it for granted as being real. You don't question it so much. And that really lets the player get invested in the story, invested in the world without having to think too much about, you know, there's nothing to throw them off. There's nothing broken about the image that they're seeing. So some of these sets are very detailed, very believable spaces. And it's not just about architecture and structure. We've got personal effects, you know, photographs and you know, calendars and memorabilia that people have that really give it a sense it's been lived in by people and not just something that's been created from scratch and has never been lived in. So this is just one part of it. This is the visual side of things. I'll hand you over to Byron just now to talk about the sound, and then we'll show you how this all comes together. So thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we made the sound of Alien Isolation. And I kind of wanted to start by quoting a certain George Lucas who famously said that sound is 50% of the movie-going experience. And I think a similar thing can be said about the game experience, except it's probably split three ways. That's visually, audibly, and physically. Physically being the kind of gameplay mechanics. So we can say that sound is a third of the game-going experience, which isn't quite as catchy as what George said, but nevertheless, the more important thing, I think, is that all three of these kind of systems disciplines, should I say, have to come together at the right time to make a really immersive experience. So, why is sound such an important part of the game-going experience? Well, first of all, sound is a really emotional medium. It kind of works on a subconscious level, so it can evoke all kinds of feelings like anxiety, fear, stress, tension, release. And that's a really important part of creating a horror experience because we want to push the player kind of emotionally in certain ways. We want to make them feel scared and we want to make them feel anxious. That's a really important part. Also, sound is quite an immersive medium. It helps to ground objects and add a sense of realism. And also, sound isn't bound by the confines of a picture frame or the edges of a TV or the edges of a film, a theatre, for example. It's a lot more than that. It can tell us what's happening in the other room or behind the other side of a wall or down the other end of a corridor. It's not confined by what's happening here and now. It tells us a lot more. And that's quite an important part of creating a horror experience because we want to both lead and mislead the player. We want to create that fear of the unknown. So as soon as you start to hear something but you don't see it, straight away it puts you on edge. And obviously we want to basically drive an emotional reaction from the player. So how do we do this? How do we use these principles in Alien Isolation? Well, first of all, it's important to understand that although the story part of Alien Isolation is quite a linear experience, the kind of core values of it are quite non-linear. So that whole gameplay moment of you and the alien is very non-linear. So we have this unpredictable, clever, adaptive alien that uses its senses to hunt you down so it can hear you, it can see you in plain sight, and it can see the kind of the light coming from your torch. So it uses these senses to hunt you down, and that's quite a problem for the sound team because we need to be able to preempt what's happening. We want to be able to build tension and suspense. So it became an exercise in creating systems that could do that, systems that could react to what the alien's doing and react to what the player is doing and basically tell us what's happening. So, moving on to the score. One of the most recognizable parts of the film, audibly, is definitely the score. Jerry Goldsmith's original 1979 score is very unique to the film, and we knew when we were making an Alien experience that we were going to have to license or try and license that score, and I'm proud to say that we did. We managed to license the themes, which was a great moment. It was high fives all round to the sound team. It was one of the big pieces of the puzzle, but as soon as we started to drill down into that score, we realized there was only a few moments of real thematic material, and we needed something that was 120-minute plus, something that was suitable for the game. So the composers had to go about drilling down into finite detail what really made that score feel like an Alien score, so that they could expand upon those themes and those motifs and make more for us. And I'm going to play a small video of one of the first recording sessions we did down at Air Studios. One of the most amazing parts of this actually is some of the musicians in the orchestra actually played in the original orchestra back in 1979, so they're actually there 35 years ago, and they're now recreating that for us, which is quite amazing. So that's a small part of one of our first sound recordings that we did. So we had this amazing music, thanks to Jerry Goldsmith and our composers, but we needed a sound engine that could play that music back at runtime. So we couldn't have a static score. That score needed to be able to change. It needed to be able to adapt and almost remix and react to what was happening. It needed to be able to change depending on what the player was doing, but also on what the alien was doing. We needed to be able to drive both suspense and tension. And I'm going to show a small game clip now which shows that kind of system running. So I think that's a good example of the system at work, something that we call the context-driven sound engine. And two key factors kind of drive that system. The first one is stealth, which is one value which tells us at any given moment how stealthy the player is being. And a few key factors drive that, things like the amount of noise the player makes, the distance they are to the enemy, and also the enemy's awareness. So something like the alien has lots of different awareness states, and all of those feed in to give us a stealth amount. Secondly, threat, which is distance to the enemy and the enemy's awareness. But you might look at those and think, well, they're kind of the same thing, but they act very differently. A good example might be as soon as the alien sees you, you're probably about to die unless you've got the flamethrower active. But at that point, your threat is maxed out and your stealth is 0 because you're being the most unstealthy person on Sevastopol. So those two key factors change both the music, almost remixing it live at runtime, but also it changes the mix of the game. So a good example of that might be the player hiding under a table in AI as the alien stalks by. The game will know that, and it will decide to start changing the mix. The idea is we want to focus in on what's important, which is the relationship between you and the alien. So it will start to drop away the atmosphere and the unimportant sounds, the kind of noise that you want to filter away, and it wants to focus what's important, and that is you and the alien. So it will start to raise up the sounds of the alien and the sounds of your breathing and your kind of other sounds to try and help kind of bring more tension and suspense. And of course, this happens on a subconscious level. We don't want the player to notice it, because that would be bad. We just want them to feel the effects. So a little bit about the world. I could talk for ages about how we made the sound of the world, but I don't really have enough time, so I'm just going to talk about one key thing, which is authenticity, which Jon's talked about quite a lot. And that extended to the sound team, definitely. We want to be as authentic as possible. But obviously, the film happened, it was made 35 years ago, 1979, and finding original materials very hard. This was a time of analog tape, big reel-to-reels. There was no digital archiving or digital recording back then. So getting original material was very hard, but our creative director, Al, he got onto Fox a lot, and eventually they sent us, or what they did do, sorry, is they sent someone down to their archives, which is, let's go back, which is actually underneath the Fox lot. So it's not like a small back room, it's a massive, almost warehouse-sized place underneath their lot in LA. And they brought us back some reels, some analog reels, and they said, do you want these? It's got like Alien M&E written on it. And we were like, yeah, we just want anything, just send it over. So they sent it over digitally to us. And when I opened it up in Horsham in the studio, what we had was the original sound effects that had been recorded by the British sound engineers over at Shepperton 35 years ago. So this wasn't the whole film, this was just small independent sound effects that were supposed to support the music. This was like a goldmine for us. It meant we could make more of this original content. I've got a recording of one of the sounds that we found. See if you can recognize it. There's a cue at the end. Clue at the end.
Effects 1.
Effects 1.
Effects 5.
So, along with the British sound engineers, you also heard what we dubbed the space whale, which we've used that like loads in the game, everywhere. But what we've been able to do is take the original recordings, and we've been able to make more, which is amazing. And what I really like is the fact that these sounds have been gathering dust for 35 years. Nobody's seen them, and we're getting to put them in front of a new audience. And there's lots of these kind of sounds across the game. I don't want to spoil it, but there's lots of this stuff, and it really helps to add an authentic feel. And that's me. bring Al back on. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So actually, we just wanted to kind of pull, oh my goodness, pull this all together and show you a slice of the game, which we haven't really showed much of, and that's the start of the game. No spoilers, don't worry. But this gives a good little glimpse of all of that incredible work coming together right now.
What the hell happened here?
Thanks very much. So I don't know if we have time for questions.
We do. We have about 5 minutes for questions. Microphones will be brought to just in the aisles here. If you have a question, just walk up to the microphone and queue up there. Lean in and be confident and proud. And yeah, ask away. Get up there now and ask.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask, how did you balance between keeping the game suspenseful and tense all the time, but not exhausting the player?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, this game has to be about tension and release. It can't be kind of unrelenting. I don't think that'd be much fun. But at the same time, I think we try and take a step back as much as possible. We create the structure. We have this cool story that's going to pull you through, and we kind of put the main beats down and the kind of key events. But what happens in between is kind of down to the systems and down to you, down to your choices. And so, if you want to hide in a locker for 5 minutes and have a bit of downtime, you can have a go at that. So you can help drive that kind of roller coaster. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we never want the player to feel safe, 100% safe. But there are moments where we want the player to be able to breathe a sigh of relief, kind of collect their thoughts before embarking once again.